And for this particular craft, I'm going to take these ceramic wall decor pieces the Dollar Tree has, and they're fairly big, and just apply a circular stencil over to the top of them. I have a lot of people ask for easier crafts, so I'm going to make the effort to try to incorporate that more so. I feel personally stencils are really easy, and they're also a great way to elevate even the simplest of Dollar Tree pieces. Even though I have some of you that say they struggle with stencils, maybe together as we're going along and I'm doing different ones, you will get the courage to try this a little bit more. People, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed these Christmas crafts, and until next time, bye. And we're going to need 3 wood slices. Now each one is a little bit bigger than the next. Of course, our head is the smallest. Once we have it all tiered properly, we're going to need to create a sturdy base for this to attach to, and I cut down a shim to accomplish that. And of course, I'm trying to bust out the wood glue, and it's all stuck in there, and I got lazy and just screwed off the lid, and it then poured out onto our wood slices. Don't be pretending like you guys don't get tired of pulling that sticky stuff out your wood glue. I know you do, okay? You're not alone. To make sure our shim stayed stuck on there immediately, I added a little bit of hot glue in the sections I didn't have any wood glue, and then let this dry for about 5 minutes before I carried on to our painting. I'm just using white chalk paint for this part, and I'm going to then come in to draw the face after this completely dries. I am taking a little bit of it and brushing around the edges of our wood as well, so it just all looks blended in. This is a little snowman I had left over from last year that I got from Walmart. The sucker was on really well. I had one hell of a time getting this little hat off of here. Pulling one hat off of a snowman and put it on another snowman. For the face, I'm keeping it very simple. We are painting on our little orange nose. I kept the eyes in the shape of like an oval. And for the smile this time, instead of doing dots, I made like little squiggly lines. For his little scarf, I'm taking some Dollar Tree fabric that I have on hand, and I'm cutting it about 7 inches long, and we're going to just create that little dovetail effect at the very end of it, wrap it around his neck, glue it on him, and then we are going to glue our snowman onto our base, and that's going to be it for this little guy. We are using Dixie Belle's chocolate to give this a once over. It's not thorough. We left some gapping, and we are leaving this whole area in the center here nice and open so we can put our white paint and our gorgeous napkin. I've been dying to decoupage with this. Yes, it's in my napkin bundle kits, in case you're wondering. It is for sale on my website. I want to sell this, and I want people to be able to use this as a tray if they want. So we're going to use this dishwasher safe Mod Podge. It works just the same as the decoupage or regular Mod Podge, just in case you're wondering if there's a difference in application. There is not. It works just perfectly. Once I got that brown all dry, we're gonna bring in the makeup brush. I'm going to take some of Waverly's plaster, and we are going to dry brush this very thoroughly over the whole piece. Give it a really good aged look, and I love using makeup brushes for this because it really helps to just not cake on paint, but more so, just look at that. Look how it's applying. It's just dusty almost, right? And I know you guys are just going to pull your hair out when I tell you that I even go over this again with more brown. Listen, it's a layering process. It is just what I do. I wanted to add like a banner type thing almost around the edge. So I had these gorgeous stencils I picked up off Amazon for a couple dollars, and I'm just doing the top part of the stencil with some red. Adding that white over the brown is really going to, one, give us that aged look and a little bit of a color variation, but 2, help this pop. Even when I go over this, because I do go over this and sand it down, it really helps everything to just blend in and look like an old piece. Plus, I feel like the red kind of matched the napkin, and we want to just have everything kind of tie in together. Obviously, our napkin is not big enough to fit the whole tray. So to give the appearance that it is just one piece and it's meant to be like that, I am ripping this napkin all up. We are putting little pieces of this napkin in different sections of the tray, and then we're going to come back in with some paint and we're going to blend everything in to make it look like it is just meant to be one piece. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It is honestly up to the artist's opinion where you want to place your napkin. I will say that I recommend whatever your largest piece is that you want to be your main focal point of something like this, you put that on last if you are not sure how you want to spread your pieces out. If you are sure about how you want to put your pieces on there, you go right ahead and slap that sucker on first, and then you just put your other stuff on. I waited to do my centerpiece last, so this way I could get some of these other pieces up and make sure they were spread out enough that it covered the whole piece and looked like one unified project. A few little tips for doing this, because I know you guys are like, why are you not using your sponge? The pieces are super, super tiny and the napkin is really thin. So what I'm basically doing is wetting a tiny piece, pressing on it with my finger, just tappity tap tap tapping, and then taking the brush to just paint right over top of it so it is immediately attached to the board or the tray. See how I'm holding the napkin down here as I go? If you pull on it gently, it allows it to stay tight. So as you're applying the Mod Podge over top the napkin, it helps to minimize the wrinkles. If you are really skilled at your wax paper and your parchment paper with your iron-on method, you go right ahead if you want to have that many of minimized wrinkles. I am not, I know me, and I would have that iron sticking to all the Mod Podge around our napkin, and it would be, oh, it would be such a mess. I would be so upset that it was all sticking to the paper, and this just works best for me. I know many of you are new to decoupage. You guys tell me that you are, so I just want to encourage you to try doing this in small sections on a smaller project you're not too worried about before you try it on one that you are. Once I was happy with the napkin placement, now I need to kind of blend in everything, and I'm taking a fan brush with a little bit of that chocolate and going to the very far edges of the tray and pulling it in single strokes towards the napkin. Wes brought me in a drink, so I was taking a little break on the camera. I was like, oh, I'm filming this. I did, you know, block out me taking my gulps, though. I didn't think you guys wanted to hear that. I used the plaster the same way I used the chocolate color with the fan brush and continued to just blend in between where there was no napkin. I wanted to bring some more of that vintage look into the center, and I took small sections of the stencil and added a little bit of red onto the top here. In the bottom corner, I wanted to add a little bit of an eyesore. So I took some of the plaster and added a big stencil right down in the corner. I took twine and wrapped our little handles up, and simply stunning. That is all I can say about this tray. I absolutely am in love with it. Canvas, you can use whatever size canvas you want. This is what I had on hand, and we're going to create our backdrop blending these two colors together, because once we flick our snow on here, we want a little bit of a contrast. We don't want just that white background, and the actual picture itself has it looking like there is definitely some different color than just a plain white canvas on there. Next, I'm just drawing some straight lines where the trees are going to be, like the different levels, and mind what I'm using. Listen, I just grab whatever, okay? I don't know where a ruler is around this joint, so I improvise. Above our trees, there is like a shadowing. So to create that effect, I'm mixing a little bit of brown and black together, and we're going to create that effect as well. I'm also making sure the brush is really dry when I go to apply this. So there's just a very minimal amount of paint on the brush. And then I'm basically starting below where I know the trees are going to be and just pulling the brush upwards and loosely, so we do not leave any end marks. We want it to just look like that fades right into our sky. Next, I'm just going to take my finger. You can use a paper towel or a baby wipe for this, whatever you want. I'm just taking my finger and just smudging the brown at the very top to blend it into the sky a little bit more. And I'm just going to pop up a picture right here so you guys can see the final look I'm going for. Next, I'm taking the brush again, making sure it's super dry, and I'm going to just add a little bit more of heavier color variations in certain spots. Next, we're going to start applying our black tree background, and I'm just using the same paintbrush I started using. We're going to go up and down and sideways. Up and down is going to indicate our tree tops, and sideways is going to indicate the width of our trees. You can do this in a patting motion or a thin line back and forth. Just make sure you do not have a ton of paint on the brush. Once I was happy with the treetops, I then just started taking the black paint and really filling in the bottom. I did some padding and I did some long strokes with the brush, just making sure I fill in most of the white canvas. I did not leave a whole lot of white, but just a little bit, because we are trying to make it look like there's different layers in our trees and levels and some depth. Before I started the next color, I decided to completely dry the canvas with the heat gun instead of waiting. I'm a little impatient. I'm sure some of you guys can relate. Who hates waiting for paint to dry? Nobody wants to do that. Next, I'm taking a really light gray. Any light gray will get this accomplished. I'm pretty sure it's still the same granite gray I used to blend the backgrounds. And a fan brush. I felt at this point, since we pretty much have our black background, now it's time to really kind of bring in that tree aesthetic, and fan brushes are perfect for doing that with trees. And I do not have this sped all the way up, so you can see that I am literally just taking the fan brush and I am angling it and tapping each side one at a time. I've painted so many different types of trees this year. I am confident that those of you that can't paint, if you couldn't paint before this year, I'm gonna have you paint a tree. Some kind of tree. Send me some pictures in my email or Instagram me. I want to see your trees. Next year, I'll have to do snowman or gift boxes or something. Every year, we'll just have to find something new for me to paint all holiday season to help you all along your journeys. There were not a whole lot of the gray trees in our painting, so I just did a couple just to have that extra layer in here. And then I'm going to just use a white paint to create our white trees. In total, it took me a little over an hour to paint this, and honestly, it's so stunning. It belongs on a much larger canvas, in my opinion. This is something you could keep up all year long in your house. If you got a spare toothbrush, I recommend that for this part. I did not, so I am just using a paintbrush, and we are flicking some snow all over the top of our canvas. I do hope you guys will give this a try. If you do, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or email me a picture. I love seeing people's DIYs and having them share those things with me. I know so many of you say you love to watch me paint, so I hope you're getting your fill of that this season. I surely have been enjoying these pieces I've been making for you. Now, we're first going to just take our antique Waverly wax and we are going to stain everything. Using a baby wipe is probably the best method to apply this quickly and easily. I am actually out of baby wipes, so I'm just using a paper towel here. Now while that's drying, we're going to create a raised stencil. I'm using some DAP spackling here. My favorite is Joint Compound, but I can't get to it, and this was right over my head, so it's a little dry, okay? I was struggling to get its crustiness out of here, but we're gonna make it work by adding some white paint to this and some water. And just use a little bit of elbow grease until you have the consistency of smooth butter. And then pick out your stencil. I thought this one would go just perfect with the way that it just kind of lays when I turn it, you know, like a triangle and at the top of the tree. And then we're just going to patch it in as we go down. I did take a minute to kind of center our little crates and make sure that it wasn't going to overlap where we're going to put our spackling. And once I had that all marked up, I started applying our little mixture here. Now I have this little spatula thing because I get most of my craft supplies at Ross, and this just happens to come in one of the little paintbrush bundle things that I purchase. But don't hesitate to use a spoon. You got a plastic spoon laying around, use that joint. It will do the job just the same. I've been doing this for years at this point, and I tell you, it doesn't matter if you have crafty special tools. It is going to look like this no matter what, as long as you keep your stencil in place. And a little tip, if you want an extremely professional finish, make sure you're washing your stencil in between applications. As you can see here, there is a little bit of smudging. I'm going to show you how to fix that though. For crafters' sake, I like to call it, just to save some time, I may cut a corner or two. Okay, please don't hate me. If I'm not reselling a piece, and I'm keeping it and I'm just kind of showing you guys inspiration, I have no problem doing that. But I like to be real with y'all and let you know, like, hey, I'm not washing this stencil every time. This is why it's bleeding, or this is why there's extra. And in case you guys do that, guess what? I'm going to show you how to fix it. Like right here. Wait until this is dry, and then you're going to take a tiny paintbrush with a little bit of your antique Waverly wax, and you are just going to go over it. And boom, it is completely fixed and it looks really, really nice. That is a good reason why you paint first or stain before you do a raised stencil like this, in the event that there is some bleed through. And even though you try to do as much as you can to prevent that, you can go back over it, and these little details will help fix those problems and give you that high-end looking finish. Here we are just addressing the dangly crusty bits that are hanging off the side of our tree slice. After this dries, it's pretty hard, so being able to kind of flicking one off there, scraping one off, is super easy. Next, we're going to glue on our crates. Make sure you're using some wood glue for a long hold and some hot glue for the quick hold. And if you want some extra protection, don't be afraid to use a drill bit to put some screws in there and some little pieces in the back, so it really, really stays on for a long time. And these are just some little snowflake laser cutouts that I had, and I am putting different ones on the top of these trees. So I'm going to leave the live edge piece facing the center, so it looks like both these pieces are kind of facing each other once we paint them on our boards. On one board, we're going to paint a tree, and then on the other board, we're going to paint a snowman. And we want these kind of looking at each other, so we are going to only paint half of each. Here I'm sketching half of the Christmas tree, and I'm just putting the edges where I want to make sure I don't paint past. If you guys are not good at drawing or sketching or etching, use a stencil, use your Cricut, paint out some lines, or take some painter's tape and just put an edge there so you don't go beyond that. These ideas are not to discourage you and like, Brandy, I can't paint like that. It is to inspire you to take the idea and create it and make it your own. I know everyone is not able to do exactly certain things that other creators are, but I'm always going to try and give you guys options to be able to recreate exactly what I'm doing. And here I'm just showing you the little outline on the tree that I created. Now the next board, since I want them to also be about the same height, I'm putting them back to back, and I'm going to start the snowman head roughly about where I have the top of the tree. And of course we're going to start out one smaller, and then if you want to do a big belly and just go all the way down, you go right ahead. I decided to do 3, like most snowmen. You know, they got the little chest area and then their voluptuous little bottom area. And here I'm just showing you that we have that all traced out for me to be able to start our painting. Typical trees are not just one green. You know what I mean, people? They got a little variation. And we're going to do the same thing with ours using these 3 colors. And for our trunk and some accents, I'm going to be using these 3 colors. Even though we're not really going to see it, we're going to start off with the base of our tree. And I'm going to just pull that black and brown that I put on half of the paintbrush, a little bit of black and a little bit of brown, and pull it straight on down to create the base where our roots are. Every single step I make creating both of these painted pieces, I make sure that they're completely dry before I move on to the next, so we do not smear the paint. The trick to creating your own painted pieces that look like you purchased from a store is to make sure that each part of your painted project is exactly what it's meant for. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to try and explain it. So here, for example, I am creating the outskirts, basically like the long pieces of our tree. And I'm using 2 colors, the very dark and the medium green, to do that. These are our very long sections. We are not going to take our branches any further beyond this point. Now, to save time, because I wanted to break this down as much as possible, I was using, see the heat gun? I was using the heat gun in between here to dry the sections. Again, you want to make sure everything is really dry. I'm now coming in with the really light green and mixing that with the medium green and doing smaller strides. And I'm going in between the gaps that we left with the darker green. This is going to give us the individuality and appearance that our tree is layered and a high-end look. I'm doing my very best to do this in one singular stroke by taking it as far as I want it to go and dragging it right towards the middle of our project. After I dried that section, I then came back in with different color variations and carried on with dragging those lines in between other lines, making some longer and some shorter. Here I've decided to create these wonky looking little branches, and these are really just going to serve as a guide for me as we start our pouncing that gives it a little bit of a 3D effect. One of those sea sponges would be really great for this if you have it. I do not, so I just rolled up a piece of paper towel, and then I took a few different colors and started pouncing on our tree. Gently, I didn't get wild with it, and I stayed in the strokes of the tree. And this part is super, super important to make sure that everything else is dry as you go, to make sure that it stays like this. Next, we're going to bring in the sponge. This is just a regular disc sponge. I cut off a little section of it, and we are going to take that really light antique white color, vanilla color, either one would work for this, and we're going to just dab on the ends of our Christmas tree, the far pieces that we have sticking out, to give it an extra added look. Once you're happy with that, pick out your accents and glue them on your tree, and that's going to be it for this one. For our snowman, we're just going to be using these two colors. The gray is to help us give a little bit of that 3D shade look. Starting out, we're just going to take white on our paintbrush, and I'm using an angled brush for this part, and I am going to just create our outline. I do find that whenever I'm doing something circular, it helps give it a more realistic look if the whole way that you're painting it, you are keeping that circle motion with the paint. Once it's dry, we're going to come in with a little bit of that gray, and we're just going to put it on the very tip of our slanted brush, and then put some of the white on the back of the slanted brush. And then we're just going to really go around our edge here, and we're going to continue with that circular motion. Once your project's completely dry, we're going to draw on our little face. I know I started off camera. I forgot to film it. Sorry. Since we want our little guy looking over at the tree, we're going to create the illusion that his eyes are looking that way. So to do this, we want the back end of the eyes to be slightly flat instead of completely rounded. For our smile, we're keeping it super simple and just using some little dots here. And then to color in the nose, I'm going to use some pumpkin orange color and paint that in. And for the eyes and the mouth, we're going to bring in the Sharpie. You can paint these in if you want as well. I find it easier when you're doing something easy like this and kind of detailed, that Sharpies are a perfect tool for the job. For the accent pieces, I just picked out colors and things that complemented the tree since it's a set, and I simply love these pieces. Check these out. They were literally bigger than my hand. I had a couple ideas for these, but since we're at the beginning of the season, I'm like, I can use these as little accents as I'm going through to add to decorate. I wanted to create a Christmas tree set. Flocked, of course. And these needed a nice rustic base. And I had these little Dollar Tree cube pieces that I picked up a little while ago, and I thought these would make awesome little bases. I can take some papers and just decoupage them on there, and the theme kind of just goes with the rusticness of the pine cones as it is. I mean, people, let me know in the comments, do you feel like pine cones are rustic? Because I think they're rustic all on their own. Now we're going to need to bring in the decoupage paper. I'm going to use this and some of Hobby Lobby's paper, but there is a particular little spot right here on this TDS Decoupage Paper. This is from my TDS Decoupage line. It can be found at thediystruggle.com. I just wanted to take this little section right here and cut it and put a couple little pieces on these dice, mostly because the colors are going to match exactly with this paper that I have had, and I love that I pick up from Hobby Lobby. And as you can see here, the two prints complement each other really well. And if you didn't know, you can pick up paper really inexpensively from Hobby Lobby if you have one local to you and you like to craft. I wasn't exactly sure which sections I wanted from the paper, so I cut off several little pieces. For our medium to attach it, I'm going to be using Deco Arts Decoupage in the mat. Of course, use whatever medium you want. Regular Mod Podge would do the trick just fine. I'm putting a healthy amount on here, and then I'm just gently pressing our piece. And no, I did not cut a perfect circle. You're welcome to, but I'm going to sand this off. And for those of you that love the burn method, you want to do that as well, you go right ahead. I just like to sand my pieces, and I feel like it works just fine. So I cut the pieces in a circle, I applied them, and then I let them dry for about 30 minutes. And while they were drying, I took the opportunity to flock our trees using this multi-surface paint. There are many ways to do this, people. You can use your glitter, you could use joint compound, you could use spackling, you could use caulk. If you want more of like the crusty white bits all over the place, I'm like, nobody's going to see them but me and you. If you're watching my videos, they're going to be little decorative accents, you know, my displays, and I'm going to probably pop around for Christmas. So I'm completely content just using some paint for this part. Now it's time to bring in our little finger sander so we can get the excess off around our paper. Please make sure that whenever you go to do this, if you're new to decoupage, it is really important to make sure that is dry. If not, no matter if it's paper, even a thicker piece of paper, or if it's a napkin, if you start sanding too early, it is just going to move and tear it. You have to get a little bit of patience, people. I know it can be rough, but patience is key to making sure that this looks flawless on here once it's sanded. I really loved how the colors from the TDS Decoupage paper complemented the little pieces that I chose from the Hobby Lobby paper, and then took some of Waverly's wax and went around the cube and went, or the dice, and went around our little pieces of paper that we decoupaged on here just to make it all rustic and fabulous. To attach the pine cones to our little base, I'm just using some hot glue. People, don't do as I do, okay? I am out of wood glue, and later on in the video I do find some Gorilla Glue gel, but make sure you're using a glue that is going to hold these suckers onto here, okay? Your girl needs to make a trip to the store, okay? Shocker. I took some little, look how cute these are. These are from Dollar Tree, the little Christmas bells. I glued them onto different little sections on the smaller trees and left the top one blank and put a little star right at the top of that one. And I cannot tell you how much I love these pieces. I always feel so blessed whenever people send me things and want to see what I create with them. I hope I did not disappoint her. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on making any of these for the holiday season. This joint was $3, people, and I just had to have it. I'm like, this will be absolutely perfect for me to just incorporate into staging really any time of year, not just Christmas. We're going to give it a very vintage makeover with some white paint, starting with a little sanding, of course, with this 180 grit, because we got to get that sheen off of here to ensure that our paint is going to stick to the surface. Once I was done that, I did wipe all the excess sand down just to make sure we didn't have any bits in there between our paint. And I'm going to take this black inked chalk paint by Waverly and give it a messy coverage. I'm not trying to necessarily cover all of the brown. I just want to make sure there is some different variations. So once we put our crackle on here, we're going to see that beautiful vintage look pop through all the different cracks in our paint. I let this completely dry, and I love how it looks even just on its own like this, but I'm trying to make it a little Christmassy here. So we're going to take our crackle. If you guys have not used this stuff before, it's amazing. It's also down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box. You want to just put a light layer on and be very purposeful with this stuff. I always try to let people know that it is not forgiving, so make sure that exactly where you're placing this, you want that crackle effect to show through, or you do not care if your paint is separating in those sections. So for the stool itself, I did leave a couple little spots, so this way I could have a few sections of some solid coverage. And then I took a white multi-surface paint and went over with the brush in singular strokes. And I say that, people, because this stuff is not made for you to go back and forth over it. If you go back over a section once the crackle is dry, it is going to just pull the crackle off and you're going to have a huge separation, which is why I said make sure you're purposeful and you don't mind in those sections if there is some separation. Luckily for this stuff, because you are going for a vintage look when you're using it, if there is a little bit of separation, it's usually not a big deal at all. A little tip I learned from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs is if you take your heat gun over this stuff, it works like magic and separates it even more. So I really wanted this to be extremely cracked up, and I took that heat gun and really focused it in on certain areas to get a beautiful open cracked look. Look at that. It's so beautiful to me. I absolutely love this. And you can see on the top here where there are some sections with no crackle. That is where I didn't put any, so we had a few solid pieces. I wanted to add a little bit of writing and had these transfers from Dollar Tree and just cut out the little sections with the words. And I did cut out one of the little emblems and just transfer right on the top. While I was watching this video on Pinterest, I seen these little frames in the background. I'm like, that looks really familiar. I think I have some of those. And I do. I had these Dollar Tree frames. They're like chalkboard pieces. Had a couple of them, so I figured I would take some white paint and recreate those little frames, but put my own designs right on the inside. These can be a pain to paint to begin with, so I like to start with a sponging and then I'll go over them with the paintbrush and a fan brush and a detail brush, allow them to dry. Usually it takes about 3 coats, but when you want to get in all those tiny details with a different color, and here I'm going to be using Antique Waverly Wax, take a tiny detail brush and go in all those little sections. Once it dries, no matter what color you're doing this with, I've done this with a couple different colors, it looks a little weird, but I promise you take some of the paint that you had as your main base and you dry brush right over it, and it just blends out all those beautiful details. Off camera, I gave the backside of those chalkboard pieces a nice coat of white paint. This will serve as a nice background for our TDS Rice Paper designs. These are A4 in size, and I'm just gonna take them and place over top of our little cardboard pieces, and then just press around where I need to cut and trim for the design that I want to be on the inside of the frame. You can attach your rice paper however you would like. I'm going to use some good old Mod Podge and put a nice little coat on these pieces and then apply our gorgeous rice paper right to them. I wanted to share how this idea is awesome, whether you're using it for one beautiful single piece that you want to kind of make the center of attention, or if you are wanting to highlight the background of something, these frames and this idea is absolutely perfect to just add some unique decor into your home this holiday season. A little Christmas palette decor from Pinterest? I don't mind if I do, especially a little wood basket. So I grabbed some of Dollar Tree's wood palettes, 3 of them to be exact in this style and 2 in this style. And I grabbed some paint sticks, which I get from Home Depot, in case anyone's wondering. I'm gonna use some Antique Waverly Wax for our color, and I'm gonna add a little bit of water. This just helps move the Antique Waverly Wax around. I also do this with paint. I've painted hundreds of palettes at this point on this channel. I've shared many different techniques to be able to do this. If you can't spray paint them, adding water to paint or anti-waverly wax, it helps, but people, I still hate it. Definitely not one of my favorite things to paint or stain. I took a minute and pieced everything together with these palettes once they were dry, and then just added a little bit of hot glue to start. I find when I'm not sure the exact placement of something, that's always a good idea to start with, and then I'll come back in with some Type-On wood glue or some tacky glue, or here I'm using the Quick and Thick on a paintbrush and just going over everything, all the seams, to ensure that we get that nice long hold. I found a little snowflake stencil floating around in my stash, so I grabbed some white paint and a little paintbrush and just went in very gingerly on our piece, coloring it in. I then grabbed our paint sticks, and people, this is completely up to you. Measure them how high you would like and then trim them down to whatever size you would like, and then just attach them. I used some more of my Type-On Quick and Thick and put everything all together, added in some greenery, and I love how rustic this little piece is. I absolutely thought this framed paper dot Christmas tree was beautiful, and I got the idea to create something similar with some napkins. So I grabbed a Dollar Tree frame and I painted it up white with my Waverly Snow White chalk paint, allowed this to dry, and then I went and grabbed some cardboard to trim it down to size for our backing. I decided to go with cardboard. If you wanted to use real wood, you absolutely could, but I knew Dollar Tree had these amazing wallpaper pieces, and it was just a matter of picking which one was going to be perfect for the background on our piece. So I grabbed a couple and then made a couple comparisons with the frame and with the napkins until I decided which wallpaper I thought would match the best. Then I trimmed the wallpaper down to size, attached it to the cardboard, and put it inside our frame. For the tree trunk part, I just grabbed some dowels and I cut them down to size. The size really is relative according to what you think is long enough. I didn't measure mine, I just eyeballed them and went with it. Two of these pieces are napkins, and then one is a piece of burlap. I couldn't really find a blank napkin that I felt made sense with these two pieces, so you'll notice here that I'm using double-sided tape to attach the napkin. I want it to have some freedom that if I mess this up, I could pull it back off. So I started out with the double-sided tape. I put like 2 or 3 strips down, and then gave it a little bit of a wavy appearance. You could do this as much or as little as you would like. I just went with a minimal amount just to give a little something something. You can absolutely leave it flat, completely up against the board. You could grab some scissors, give it that scalloped look, but I decided just to do that mostly with the napkin pieces. I used hot glue for the burlap because I knew that the glue wasn't, or the tape wasn't really going to hold that into place, and then just alternated with the layers and trimmed the tree up as I attached everything into place. At the top of my tree, I decided to add a little bit of greenery and a star. Absolutely finish off your piece however you would like. I love how shabby chic this piece turned out. Over in Dollar Tree's non-seasonal section, there's always some goodies to pick up to kind of get you in the mood to create seasonal decor, especially these new ceramic pieces. I absolutely love these things. In yarn, well, they got tons of colors, so I'm just gonna grab a green one. We're gonna take all these pieces and create a tabletop decor set, starting off by taking this yarn and wrapping it around just the top of the stars. You can cover your stars completely if you would like to. I decided to wrap mine and leave just a little bit of that wood hanging off right of the tips. Whenever I'm attaching fabric of any kind to wood, I really like to use tacky glue. And in this case, as always do, I just grabbed it and started squeezing. However, to my surprise, I didn't attach the lid the last time I used it. Oh, I think I ruined it. I think I saved it. I think I saved it. Let it dry. Now you can paint these ceramic beauties on up if you would like to, but I wanted to go with a little modern feel, kept them just as they were, and grabbed some black ribbon and just attached them right to the center. You can absolutely leave these blank if you would like, but I had these little ornaments that I collect throughout the season, and I thought they would look just perfect right in the center. Next, I grabbed some floral foam and just shoved it right down into those ceramic pieces. And just like I hoped, that tacky glue dried clear and you could not tell that I dropped it all over this thing. So I just shoved it right on down into our little ceramic piece. I grabbed a napkin, used that instead of messy moss, and then added some greenery. I'm not sure if you see the little wood 3D craft kits that they have at Dollar Tree, but I always thought it would be a really cute idea to use them in floral foam and add them into your arrangements. So I just put a couple pieces in here for a little something something, and I absolutely adore how these turned out. For this Kirkland's dupe, I was searching Dollar Tree's ornaments section to see if I could find something that would work, and lucky for me, I did. They had the bells in silver and gold, however, they were glittery. I know, but we're gonna make this work, okay? First off, we're gonna have to get rid of these little hangers, and honestly, it was really easy. They're these little twisty ties. You just, untwist them, and they pop right on off. However, I was already starting to get stressed out because it was getting messy. We are going to put a stop to that by applying 2 layers of Mod Podge on each one of these and allowing them to dry in between. This is going to seal in all them glittery bits and stop them from shedding everywhere, so we can put a layer of chalk paint over top of these pieces. Now I checked them just by rolling them around in my hands to make sure there wasn't a ton of glitter coming off. Now keep in mind, if you want to spray these with some Rust-Oleum clear spray paint, That would work really well also because there were still glittery pieces coming out of inside of our little bells, but I was fine with it for this. And then I took a sponge and tappity tap tap tapped that chalk paint all over each one of our bells. It ended up taking 2 coats for decent coverage, and once they were dry, it was time to bring on in the hammer. I'm gonna make it make sense. Hold on a second. For the ends, we're gonna be using these little pieces of scrap wood I painted the same color white, okay? As you see me putting these on top here, it's not sturdy, okay? These bells ain't sitting on top of each other without some finagling, and that's what the hammer is doing. It's creating a divot and making the ends flat. So when we put them on top of each other, see how it perfectly just falls in the little divot we've created? That's because the bell stays curved, you know what I'm saying? And you only had to do this to the one side and the piece that was on the top and the bottom, if that makes sense. Hopefully you're rolling on with me. I used some tight Bond Quick and Thick and some hot glue right next to each other to attach everything. This turned out super sturdy, and it surely would not have without me hammering the pieces flat and making those divots, so this way each piece set into each other. I was trying to just pile them suckers right on top of each other. I'm like, I can't figure out how these are just gonna stay and be sturdy to hold anything on top of them, and the hammer, it was a problem solver. Now let's take a look at our Kirkland's inspiration for $59.99 and how my dupes turned out up against those beauties for $6.25 because I had the scrap wood in my stash. You could create the ends so many different ways. Even use some little terracotta saucer pieces. That would look really cool as well. But I was trying to recreate these as cheap as possible and using pieces in my stash. For this quick and easy wall decor piece, I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's large DIY star signs. In one of these little nesting boxes, I'm going to just take some black paint and give both of them a nice coat. You can absolutely use whatever color you would like for yours. Once they were both completely dry, I grabbed a large stencil and placed it right over top of the whole star. You can use paint if you would like, but I'm going to take some of my handmade texture paste and give this a nice coat. You can also mix in acrylic paint whenever you're doing texture, give it a nice color. I happen to like it just the way that it is for this project. When you're all done with that, peel it right on off and then allow this to dry for a few hours. I'm using Type Bond Quick and Thick to put a nice little layer on the back of our box that we're attaching to the star, and then it was time to bring on in the stapler. I attached the box and this flipped it upside down and, was mindful, making sure that I was putting the staples in the right spot. For the shelf portion, I wanted to just use one of Dollar Tree's LED candles. Lately, I have been in love with adding TDS Rub-On transfers onto candles. Been adding them onto the LED ones, adding them onto the regular ones. I've just been really loving popping different things onto candles. Now, keep in mind, transfers are not meant to go on wax, so it does take a little bit of elbow grease, but with some patience, usually the LED candles I find are the easiest to plop them onto, and I love how they just add a little something extra into your decor. Absolutely love how this whole piece turned out. Do you know that Dollar Tree's pumpkins make perfect backgrounds for palette decor? Especially if you want to decoupage something. We're going to use some TDS Decoupage tissue paper with little snowman design, but first we're going to need to disassemble this pumpkin. And the best part about disassembling these pumpkins is it's super easy to do. Everything just kind of comes right on off. For our base coat, I'm going to just use some Waverly Snow White chalk paint and put a nice layer over top of this pumpkin, covering up that orange and the letters. For our medium, I'm just using some Mod Podge and putting a nice coat all over the entire piece. I'm using my mister here just to spritz a little spritzy spritz of water right over top of the decoupage tissue paper. You do not have to do this. You can absolutely just apply the paper without any spraying. But I find that sometimes when there's little grooves on stuff, it just helps me be able to manipulate it and get a really nice bond. Once the piece was dry, I wanted to make it a little rustic. So I grabbed my finger sander and just sanded down where the palette grooves were and all around the edges. To add a little something something around the edge, I grabbed my Dollar Tree metal lace and I just pulled enough out to wrap around our tabletop decor here. I'm going to bring on in the stapler so we can use this to attach onto the palette. I have definitely glued this stuff, but I find that if I'm going to use it to attach it, especially to wood, that stapler works the best. I wanted to make sure that decoupage paper melted in with the background, so I grabbed some more of that Waverly white paint and dry brushed around all the edges and where I sanded everything down. Once that was completely dry, I then grabbed my Mod Podge and put a very nice thin layer of sealer on it. A great way to use the colored candles at Dollar Tree is to paint designs onto the front of them. One of my favorite paints to use for this I pick up at Walmart. It's by Folk Art. It is a multi-surface paint and it is really inexpensive. I've also used chalk paint before. I find that they work pretty well, but I have noticed that anytime I try to do this with just regular acrylic paints, I'm putting on some coats and it can be a little tedious when you're painting on wax. So save yourself the trouble, people, and learn from my struggle and just go ahead and use chalk paint or a multi-surface. I'm keeping this DIY super simple and just painting a nice snowy ground and some trees. If you want to seal over your piece, you go right ahead. And if you want to burn a candle that you paint, I would recommend not putting too much paint on around the top, kind of putting your decoration down at the bottom and just burn it till you get to that point. Or not burn it at all. It's so pretty. And if you struggle with hand painting, just grab a stencil, people. Wrap that sucker right on around the candle. Grab you a pouncer. Make sure it is pounced pretty dry. Now, one section I did do a little bit heavier because if you make a mistake in your pouncer or whatever you're using to apply your paint onto the candle through the stencil is a little extra. I want to show you how to fix that mistake, okay? When you're happy with your application, just remove the stencil. And if you happen to see where any bleed through came about, just grab a paintbrush, a thin one, of course, a thin one. And then you can easily, because it's still wet, and the wax material, you know, it's waxy, you will be able to just kind of follow along with the lines, trace kind of where it was, wipe that excess paint right off, and it really is hard to tell where you had any bleed through with your stencil.